we do have this inner voice sort of the entire time.
What do we mean by moral?
Yeah, right. Like that's telling us the things that are right and the things that are wrong. And what was it for you? Like, what was the first instance of you sort of pushing past that inner voice, that conscience, and crossing that line?
For me, it was definitely pornography. You know, I was exposed to it at such a young age, but for some reason, I always kind of felt dirty and wrong, but very attracted to sex in general. But when it came to pornography, you know, I knew that there was probably something the matter with it because I always kept it hidden. I never openly spoke about it. And you know, I was 4 or 5 years old. It wasn't uncommon where I grew up to find a stack of Playboys in anybody's dad's house, right, or Hustlers or whatever, you know, and then take one and run it down to the forest and bury it under a tree and try to navigate my behavior around it and go take frequent trips to the pleasure tree.
What's funny is that
you know.
I have undug that porno. Like, I've been the guy on the receiving end of that magazine.
You know, so I can laugh now, but I mean, you know, really, I mean, that was the first time, and then and when it would be talked about in church or whatever, the adults were talking about the negative effects of pornography around me, I just felt that shame of like, oh, I have one of those. You know, there must be something wrong with me.
Yeah, and I think that what you just said is the biggest thing about any of this behavior, right? The compromising of morals is that's generally where we want to take it. There must be something wrong with me.
Yeah.
Like the fact that I have this line and here I am crossing it. Why? There must be something wrong with me. And what that sort of mentality will do to us, and the mind frame that it will put us in, is only going to lead us towards more of that behavior.
Sure.
In my story, when I talked about, you know, the parking lot crew, it really put me into this sort of bad boys club.
Yeah.
Right. Like where all of a sudden, like I'm a kid from the wrong side of the tracks.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'm nobody that you want your daughter to go home with.
Yeah.
You know.
Which is true anyway.
Which is, I mean, it's so funny because, like, that's literally the only thing that I did. Like, I was such an innocent kid otherwise. Yeah. Like, especially when I compare my adolescence to somebody like you who was highly involved in crime and gang activity and things like that. And I think, you know, you and I, before we started the show today, we were like, you could not have had a different upbringing, a more different upbringing than I did. And yet there's still those similarities.
So much
right?
the same.
Yeah. And I think that despite that, you know, like I still had those moments where when I would move past that, I felt the same as you did. Now I'm a bad kid.
Yeah.
So I'll show you bad kid.
Yeah.
And what that looked like for me was a lot different than it looked like for you. But it was that mentality.
Kind of felt the same. Though.
Exactly. Yeah. And it brought me to those negative places and that negative behavior much as it did yourself.
Yeah.